So I always thought my ideal watch collection size for nice quality watches would be 6. I don't know why. I've got no justification or reasoning behind it. For some reason, I just had 6 nice watches in my head. I figured that was enough to give you a good variety of brands, styles, complications, materials, etc. But since buying my Zenith and having owned it for almost 3 months, I found it very difficult to put my other watches back on my wrist. So what I normally try to do is rotate my watches every 2 weeks, and that kind of keeps me safe in the knowledge that I still like that watch. So after the end of that 2 weeks, it's like, yeah, cool, really enjoyed it, time to move on to my next watch. Am I trying to take that watch off before the 2 weeks? Am I trying to move to my next watch before the 2 weeks? It's a weird discipline, but it kind of gives you an understanding as to whether it's time to move a watch on, or if you still like that watch and you want to keep it. So, as I say, since buying my Zenith, I've struggled to wear anything else. That's pretty typical when you buy a new watch or new anything. Shoes, coat, whatever. You tend to wear that more. And then as the kind of honeymoon period dies down, you then move to your other watches. So I started getting to that point about 3 weeks ago, and I put my Omega Seamaster Aquaterra back on, and that was at the time on the NATO, the Omega NATO. I wasn't enjoying it, put it back on the bracelet, loved it. And then I wore that watch for about a week before going, right, okay, I want to get back to my Zenith, so let's put on my other watches for a week and see how we go. Put my IWC on, and after 2 days, I wanted to take it off. And for me, that was just a realization of something that happened a year ago. So pretty much this time a year ago, I listed the IWC on a watch forum I'm on because I just wasn't really wearing it. And there's nothing wrong with the watch. And we'll flip the camera around in a minute and just look at the watch in a bit more detail again, but not crazy detail. I'll link my detailed view of this watch in this video because I already have done that. But there's nothing wrong with the watch. In fact, it's a fantastic watch. It has the best bracelet of any watch I've ever owned, not just in terms of comfort, in terms of build, but also the way you change the links. It has the best clasp of any watch I've ever owned. I've mentioned before, the only other 2 brands to use this, and it must be a company not done by IWC, are Glasuta Original. They have an identical link removal system, an identical clasp with the micro adjust. And then Lange and Zono on the Odysseus have an identical system as well. So it's all come from the same company, but obviously bespoke to the brands that use it. The dial's fantastic, etc. But I didn't wear it. I wore it a lot when I first bought it. And then I kind of took it off my wrist, and I went through a few other watches and wore it in between. Listed it last year and said a week isn't long enough. A year isn't long enough to have a watch. Just give it a bit longer. So here we are a year later, and I've decided it's time for it to go. I just haven't been wearing it. And when I did put it back on, as I say, it made me just realize it just wasn't for me anymore. So yeah, without continuing too much here, we'll turn the camera around, look at the watch, and maybe just a few more thoughts. And yeah, let's go through why I didn't want to keep it anymore. So yeah, as I said, really, there's not anything fundamentally wrong with the watch, quite the opposite. It's very much a watch that I wanted for a long time. It has a fantastic blue sunray dial that you can see there. It's extremely easy to read. It's extremely easy to set the time because the hour markers and minute markers are so bold. It's actually the easiest time to set on all of my watches. I like the white date window. I don't mind the fact that it's slightly inset from the dial, outside the dial, like some people seem to get frustrated about. I love the fact it's only 11mm thick. I like the fact it's got brushed sides of the case and not polished sides of the case. Some people complain about it being too big on the wrist. It's 51mm lug to lug, but as you can see on my 7-inch oval wrist, it fits absolutely fine. Wears very, very thin. The links look fantastic. I've got a detailed video about this. But all the detail that goes into this, on the later IWC watches, you don't get all this perlage on the clasp. And when you push it down and fold it over, you can see it on the inside of the bracelet there. That's where they've done it, so it's quite clever. You don't get that on a lot of recent IWCs. The link changing system, again, I've talked about that on one of my other videos, but you press these little buttons and the links pop out, which means you have a very crisp and clear side profile to the links, excuse my fingerprints. I've talked about the clasp. So you've got 6 1mm adjustments. Man, zooming in on this thing when it's dark in the winter, it's hard. Right, you can see it there, hopefully. Yeah, there you go. Whoop. So what happens is you press this little button here, the logo. It pushes this bar up. You can see it moving there. And then, it's going to be quite hard to do. And then, there you go, it moves in and out. And what's nice is you can actually do it on the wrist. So if you put it to its biggest size, which I'll just do, and then when it's on your wrist, if you push it in, it ratchets in. So you can hear it ratchet in. So if I put it on my wrist, hang on, put it to its biggest size. I'm failing here. So yeah, biggest size. Oh, I think my wrist is too big. Oh, there you go. So you heard it ratchet in there. And then you can just release it by pressing the button and pulling it out. There you go. So it's the best implementation of a micro adjustment I've seen, far better than Tudor, far better than any other watch I've had. The bracelet and clasp almost make this watch worth having. If you're buying one of these, whether it's a Mark 20 or a Mark 18 or whatever, do not buy it on the rubber strap or leather strap even, I think it comes on. I know it's a lot of money, but buy it on the bracelet, it's fantastic. I love the collaboration with Le Petit Prince and the little guy on the back and the story behind that. I just like the watch in general, to be honest with you, but you just get to a point where, like I say, when you force yourself to rotate your watches, if after 2 days you're kind of going, it's not for me, I want to change to my other watches, it's just time to move on. I've always said these kind of in-between watches are up for grabs, and I do want to experiment with other brands. I'd still like a Glasuto Original, maybe a CQ. I'd still like a, oh no, the Panamatic Luna with a silver dial. That is a belter, so I'd like that. There are other brands I want to try, and other watches I want to try. So part of the fun of the hobby is experimenting, and that does mean buying these kind of really nice watches in between, moving them on, trying something else, and maybe there'll be some seller's remorse, and you come back and you buy it again. I don't know, because one of the nicest things about this watch are the dimensions. So it's 20mm between the lugs with a non-tapering bracelet, which isn't a problem. The Mark 20 only tapers slightly. 11mm thick, 51mm lug to lug. The only thing I would say is probably a bit of a disappointment, timekeeping. So I managed to get it to plus 3 seconds a day, which is still fine. It's still within COSC certifications, but I was hoping for it to be a little bit better than that by me putting it in various different positions overnight and having worn it during the day. So yeah, this is up for sale at the moment on various different Facebook pages and on my the watch forums I'm on. And let's see what comes next. I haven't actually got anything in mind. I'm not in a rush. It's just if it's not getting worn, what's the point? What's the point in a very nice watch sitting in your watch box with no wear? There doesn't seem to be any point to that at all. So probably not a surprise for me, as like I say, I kind of listed it a year ago, and now a year later I have made a decision that it's time for it to move on. So the lesson for me here is, like I say, keeping the kind of relative discipline of rotating your watches to make sure that you still actually enjoy it. And when it comes time that you don't enjoy it, just sell it, right? There's no point in having it around. There are too many watches in the world to be enjoyed. Move it on, buy something else. Cool. If you have any questions, please just let me know.